All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is a brand new year. It is Monday, January 4th, 2016. My name is Chris Latham. I am the course director for game music composition, and I will be hanging out with you all throughout the month. So hopefully you had a nice, good break filled with all sorts of wonderful things. Probably the best of not actually focusing on schoolwork for just a small moment there, a little blip on the overall schedule throughout the whole program. These online programs being at such a pace works the breaks for everybody are even always more welcome. So, and maybe, just maybe, you might have spent some time playing video games. And that is what certainly we are going to be talking about all through this month. And we'll talk about the role of a music composer working on a game project. So we have lots of things to talk about this evening. We have our classes on Monday and Wednesday. And so our Monday class here is going to be a little bit different than the rest of our Mondays because, well, first off, it's the introduction. We got a whole lot of material to cover, terminology, assignments, certainly the assignments. We've got to get into all of that. And by next week, next Monday, you will have submitted your first round of assignments. All of the assignments for the week are posted Sunday night, Monday morning, and close down the following Sunday night. So that means next Monday we will have an opportunity to take a listen to some projects that are submitted, and we will do a bit of review and listen to some of the submissions so we get an idea of what everybody is doing and how we're progressing through the class. So the class overall is really set up to give you an introduction to this side of the industry. And I certainly am aware that a lot of people come into the degree program wanting all sorts of different end destinations, and they're on their own path for their particular outcomes, and a lot of that starts out as, well, I mean, I think we're still all here for music in some capacity or form. And so as you get through your later classes, we're exposing you to different parts of the industry and showing that your music is just as viable in all sorts of other formats, just as much as it is as a piece of music on an album. And so certainly you are directed through all sorts of different classes and assignments, and they're all built for different parts of the industry overall. And last month you were with Dr. Mack and Dr. McIntyre, or Professor McIntyre, apologies. And we are, you talked about the movie industry and film and the different medias out there, music libraries, more so last month for film and video projects, and just all sorts of different stuff. And so now this month, we are going to be talking about another aspect of the entertainment industry as a whole, and that is games and how music interacts with a game. What is expected from a music composer? What sort of skills do you bring to the table? What sort of things are expected of you? And a lot of times working with clients, you should be the most knowledgeable music person in the room. And so trying to interpret the intentions and the directions of a client into a soundtrack where they can't necessarily tell you exactly what they want. A lot of people with music and just art in general, people know it when they see it, but they probably couldn't describe it to you very clearly, or they would be the musician and they would be speaking that language. So we'll be talking about the role of a music composer working in a game development team, leading the production of the music soundtrack, what that involves. Kind of the first half of the month is more towards the creative side of things, or the creative part of the overall workflow. And that involves the design and instrumentation and figuring out the overall style and aesthetic and themes, and just getting the overall kind of overview or outline of what the game's going to be all about musically. Typically, in the beginning, you're just writing music for the sake of investigating your palette of sounds and the direction of the soundtrack overall. And then over time, you will be narrowing it down and determining exactly which piece of music ends up in what part of the game. And then towards the second half of the month, we will be talking about more of the technical side, more towards the end of the month overall, but because there's a lot of the creativity involved in the first part. But on the technical side, we are going to be talking about basically what happens to your WAV files to get them into the game and playing back correctly, because like how is it set up so that when the player enters that room or finds the enemy or the monster attacks, or they save the village, or they find the treasure, or they beat the puzzle, or whatever the outcome of the game is, or a particular part of the game, how does the music react? How does the game know what music to play at the right time, or how do you set that up? How does it such that when the player hits that button on the controller, the correct sound or the correct piece of music is heard? And so it is certainly, game development is a team sport, sort of like a film production where you are following or part of a much larger team. There's often designers and developers and directors and producers and all sorts of folks that are guiding the way and having the intentions and ideas, and it's your job to realize that creatively. So we will be covering all sorts of aspects. That's really how the very biggest flow of the month is through beyond, I guess, the weeks, but how it then content will focus a little bit more on the creative side and a little bit more on the technical side towards the tail end. So there's a couple of big disclaimers that I want to throw up there early on in the class and put this out there because, well, I guess the first one here is you don't actually have to be any good at video games or even play video games all that much to be successful in this class, right? Certainly it is not your skills at playing video games that determines your success. And it is the skills that you do bring to the table, and that is expected from you as the music composer on the project or our projects throughout this month, is your skills in everything that you've been learning throughout the entire degree program. Your understanding of music theory, composition, instrumentation, orchestration, the production, and certainly the understanding of all the technical musical side, meaning understanding your DAW and your synths and samplers and all your instruments and recording and bouncing everything out and formatting like that. Those are the parts that are expected of you, certainly in this class and even beyond, really, especially as you're starting out, where your responsibilities as the music composer really often end, and I say that with a big asterisk, but can often end with the delivery of the approved WAV files. And then it's somebody else's responsibility to take that music and actually put it into the game and reference the correct WAV files and set it all up to work correctly. So that's the first one, is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. And that's now, if I know that there are folks coming through this class. There are often maybe two big categories. There's people that eat and breathe and live video games and are playing all the newest and latest stuff and are up on the industry and the technology and what's going on in games and what's popular. And that's that sort of mindset in the industry is going to get you quite far, and you're gonna. I mean, any industry that you go into, you must eat, live, and breathe it. Like you are going to, if you're into music, then that means you should be listening to all sorts of music, figuring out what is first off, maybe what's popular and why is it popular, what's good, why is it good, how they did it, the artists, the production team, the producers, the recording studio, the record labels, the publishers. Every aspect. You should be listening to all sorts of music, paying attention to the credits, who did what, and basically submersing yourself in all that is the music industry, right? If you're interested in being a film composer, you need to speak the language of film. Clients will often talk in the language of previous films or games or albums or whatever the media is. That's the common language that clients and musicians share. They may not can't explain what they want, but they can say, "Hey, I heard this over here, and this sounds really cool, and I'd like to do something in that sort of direction." And it's your job to take that and interpret it into new music. And it just so happens that if it's video games that you're interested in, that means you should be playing tons of video games. You should be up on the industry. Who are the developers? Who are the publishers? The technology itself, the games, the composers, who did what, and that goes for whatever part of the industry that you are in. And so if you don't play games, then this month we will certainly immerse you in all of that. We have games for you to play. We encourage you to find all sorts of new concepts and games and ideas and all that stuff. So if you don't play games, you certainly will through this month, and we'll talk about how it's all works together and not just like how do you play a game, but the industry behind it and how are they so very successful or not successful in what they do. All right. So that's my number one disclaimer. You don't actually have to be good in video games to be successful in this class, but we will be certainly talking and playing video games. Number two is one very common question that comes up pretty early on in this process is, do I have to be a programmer? Do I have to know code? Do I have to know how to actually program everything and get it into the game? And that is certainly not an aspect, number one, of this month. But out in the industry, your responsibilities, the skills that you bring to the table as a music composer are that of music composition. The creation, the product, you are in charge of all aspects of the soundtrack, the production, the delivery of it. If something's messed up, then they come back to you and you go back and you fix it in your composition. But it is often somebody else's job to get and program, certainly code and program, but otherwise get the sounds in the game. Now, that also comes with an asterisk of there are a lot of folks in the industry that start learning the technical side, especially even more so in the past couple of years where this technology has become much more available. And they learn all of the technology that's involved in the process of getting the music into the game. It's kind of like being a session musician in a studio. You could spend your entire life on one side of the glass, being the vocalist, being the guitarist, being the drummer, being the brass, whatever your instrument is. And there are people that their entire life is as the performer, and there's a huge aspect of that. It's certainly very valid. However, a lot of folks, maybe more so if they are the artist, much less of a band or ensemble, but they are the artist or they just are more interested in the technical side, they want to learn what happens on the other side of the glass, where you realize very quickly that if you leave it all up to somebody else, they can totally destroy it. Now, hopefully they're professional and they'll make it even better, and you can learn from them. But there's also that aspect of, man, if I just figured this out or knew how to do this, then I could do it all myself and do it a whole lot better or cheaper or more efficient or more as intended. There's a lot of folks coming through this degree program that is some aspect of why they're here. There are the folks that are they came in with the music chops. They play their instrument. They understand music theory. They just want to be able to make themselves sound better in a more professional setup. Like they want to learn some of the technology and how their instrument interfaces with the computer to get the best recording and best performances possible. There are other folks that come at it from the technical side, where they know DAWs and synths and samplers and plugins and routing, and they might not be able to write you any notes on the piano or on their instrument, but man, they can make some really cool sounding stuff and do some interesting stuff with the technology. And those folks, the technical folks, want to learn more about the theory and the production, or the theory, instrumentation, the rules of musicians interfacing together versus a musician just in front of the computer. So, same sort of idea as a music composer. Often, early on, your job is to just make the music. Excuse me. Just make the music. And over time, as you send it off to the developer, they might screw something up or not do something as you intended. Right? It's what they want, but it may not be exactly what you thought it was going to be. And so, understanding more of the technical side, how it all works, how it all plays together, how the music and the computer and the game and the software all interact together. Even then, it is not hardcore programming, right? Programming is like an onion, and you can feel really cool at a very top level and do some very cool stuff. And honestly, a lot of musicians and sound designers are on that top level, and there are tools to make that process easier where you can set things up like what sound plays at the right time and loops and how it all mixes together. But it still gets way deeper than all that. So you're certainly not going to need to be a programmer. There is some basic level of technology that is involved in the process, and there are tools that are available to get very deep and to do stuff, very technical stuff without having to code and everything. Because when creating a game, right, many years ago, when everything was certainly, I wouldn't say Atari. Let's go with Nintendo and Sega Genesis in that era, and a little bit longer after that. Everything was programmed and coded. You had to find a programmer that could maybe write some music, or even more difficult, a musician that can write some code. And same thing with artists, right? It was the same world over there. You had to know art and know code to get it all together. And it's as games got better and bigger and more advanced and more money and more bigger teams, it becomes really obvious that your programmer probably isn't going to be your best composer, and your composer is probably not going to be your best programmer. And so those jobs have split more and more over time. So that is to say, when we get to all the technical stuff, that doesn't mean that it's like we don't need to learn any of this stuff. It's very integral into the whole process. Nobody is going to know how the music is supposed to work in the game better than you as the music composer, but there are many buttons and levers and strings that need to be pulled to get it to work correctly. And so you have the music knowledge and a programmer has code knowledge, and you work together. So those are the kinds of things, very general things that we'll be hitting on for the technical side. So did my big disclaimers. Definitely want to hit on those. The other thing, I guess, would be the flow of the actual class and how it kind of flows through the month. I already said that this Monday is a little bit different than the rest of our Mondays. Starting next week, week 2, we'll have the opportunity to do peer review. There is an extra assignment each week, an unweighted optional assignment. If you want to, we want us to go and listen to it and give live video recorded feedback. I can talk about it, and if you're available to come to the live class, then we can answer questions and talk about it much more in depth. Every one of the game compositions that I receive will get individualized written feedback, but this gives me the opportunity to video click around it and show you what's going on and ask any questions. So that's the benefit, certainly for the individual for peer review. But as a whole, it gives everybody the opportunity to hear everybody else's work and see what is happening, good or bad. Gives us opportunity to latch onto the good stuff and say, hey, try more of this stuff. And if there's a lot of people doing the same kind of thing that goes off and makes it more difficult or negative direction, then we can point that out also. It just basically is an opportunity. You will hear and see things that you just never would have occurred to you in these compositions. So it's certainly a good opportunity. So each week we start out with each Monday, we start out with a discussion of the new assignments, the new weekly assignments. And so later on this afternoon, that's kind of more of our focus, is hitting on all the week 1 assignments and what they entail. And then starting with week 2, we'll start with the new assignments for week 2 and then go back and talk about week 1. Then week 3, we'll talk about the new assignments for week 3 and go back and listen to week 2. Excuse me. So along with that review, there are revisions each week. Like I said, you will receive individual grades and feedback for your particular assignments. And you can make any changes for a revision to update not only the grade, but really the quality of the project overall. So you will turn everything in on Sunday each week. The deadline for all the assignments are Sunday. Then we'll do some peer review on Monday. I won't have everything graded that first day because I'll be teaching class and whatnot. But I try to get all the assignments back by Wednesday. So you get it all back by Wednesday. That opens up the Thursday and Friday. There is it's an optional revision assignment that is available. So that's the best way of being successful in this class, is updating and accepting the feedback and making positive changes. So, okay. I think I'm skipping ahead of myself in some of this stuff. So let's kind of move on into the rest of the material. So there I am. My name's Chris Latham. I'm a course director. I've been with Full Sail for a little over 13 years now. It's been a while. I started over on campus. I guess before Full Sail, my world was post-production and studios. And then, so I came to Full Sail and started out doing that. Worked in the studios, worked in the post-production classes, and then, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, we launched an on-campus game audio class. So we did that for a little while, and then this game music composition class came online. So I jumped over and I've been doing this for the past 3 years or so. And just this month and starting tomorrow, I will be launching this class back on campus. So that's always exciting. Class is always growing and new game music and audio stuff is happening. So beyond that, honestly, I am going to be learning what my new availability and schedule is throughout the month. I am going to be on messages 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Well, not Friday. Friday is my day off because I teach Saturday. Emails. So the best way of getting in contact with me is through iChat or through email. I say all of that stuff because I'm not honestly going to be at my desk all that much because I will be on campus or teaching this class. So you can call my phone and leave a message. But if you don't get me on the phone, then definitely send me an email or find me on iChat. If you can't find me there, send me an email and I will respond in short order. Now, on campus, I will be in labs a whole lot, so I can have the opportunity to reply to a few things as the students work. But anyway, that's beyond everything. Website, beyond Full Sail, have a company, a contracting, game audio contracting company, Engine Audio. So beyond the class, you can find me there. You can find me social media, Twitter, at Engine Audio, all that stuff. So that is me. Like I said, I had a start in more of the post-production side of things, and I realized some time ago that there's a lot of opportunity in the game industry. Worked in the music industry, worked in the post-production industry, and I've found way more opportunity in the game industry. We had a class with our MPBS graduate advisor, and he was listing off 5 different graduates, and 2 or 3 of them got him in games. So this is a lot of opportunity in here. The music industry is a little bit more on your own, right? You're the artist. You are the source. You are the faucet for everything. You generate everything. And working in studios, I found artists don't have money, right? A lot of them, they can't pay the bills as easily. But as a company, like EA Sports, they can pay you no problem, right? They're making hand over fist over on Madden and PGA golf and all this stuff. So I have found it a lot more beneficial to work with companies overall. And so currently working on a game called Depth. It is a multiplayer online game where it's sharks versus divers, and you can be a shark and you can be a diver, and it's all sorts of mayhem. That's fun. EA Sports is here in Orlando, so we've had an opportunity to work with them a couple times. Some other platforms, PS game coming to PS4, got some stuff on iPad and all that stuff. So what I'm getting at is whatever aspect of the industry you are into, certainly the music and the composition, and we'll be talking about all of that, but if it's recording or gear or software or hardware, or certainly games in the industry or freelancing or contracting, those are all important aspects. And what you will find in games is everything that you enjoy about music in general is also available in video games. So overall goals for this class, number 1, of course, would be to write a whole bunch of music. That's kind of why we're here overall, is to be building up your repertoire portfolio of material. And so all of the games this month are fully working video games that you can switch and change all of the music and sound effects out. Meaning that it comes either blank or just with default sounds, and your job as going through the different weeks is to be building the music and sound effects soundtrack of all of these games. So each week, weeks 1, 2, and 3, we have a new game project. It is using music in a different way, in a different format, different game genre, different approach musically. And it shows you all of the different ways that music can be set up. So our number 1 goal, of course, is to be writing music. But number 2 is playing video games. As I mentioned before, I have a very important concept in the class that is called game research. And game research means that you should be playing video games. You should not just like, hey, I got a high score, yay. You should be paying attention to the music, how the music reacts, how does the sound effects react, how does the game interact with the music, how does the player interact with the game, which changes the music, and all sorts of stuff. So if somebody asks you what you're doing this month, why are you playing video games, you say, I'm doing game research. And I still have to do that at the office, right? Look at Latham over there. He's just playing video games. I'm like, yes, my industry, everybody else over here is in Logic. I'm in Logic too. We're all working on music, but it's for a very particular cause. And so, yes, like I said, if you don't play video games, so we give you games to play and projects to work on throughout the month. And of course, with all of that music and video games, there is a lot of knowledge involved with all of that. Yes, it's all sorts of fun aspects to work with, but there's still a lot of new material. Music for a video game is, we will be talking about what is the same and what is different compared to other forms of music. Pretty much every piece of music you've probably written before is in a linear format, which means there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every time you rewind back and play that song, it's going to sound exactly the same. And that's good, right? That's you go into the studio, and your purpose in a recording session is to focus on performance and quality and capturing the best recording and performance of the artist and the instruments and the band and all that. And so there is a huge portion involved in the creation of the music. In the mix session, you spend a lot of time refining it over and over again. You listen to it and round, you put it in maybe loop, and you just listen to different parts, and you mix and use automation and plugins and all of this stuff to get the result you want. And then when you bounce it out, that is the song. I mean, it's mastered and distributed, put on a disc or put online to sell online, but that is the one version of the song that everybody hears. They hear it in their cars, they hear it in their mobile devices, they hear it in the club, they hear it in the TV or movie or whatever it is, and it's just that one thing every single time. But in games, the reaction of what the game does, or really what the player plays in the game, will change what they hear. Not everybody is going to hear exactly the same thing. Certainly in more modern games, it feels like you are the sole hero of this epic story, and it feels massive, and there's lots of reasons that you don't hear anything, well, not anything, but the same exact mix that anybody else hears, especially when you do a multiplayer game, and the computer is computers and servers is generating 6 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 or however many mixes simultaneously. And it's all done in real time in the computer. Not so much the mix of the music. Music is often bounced and kind of burned into the file and doesn't change except for when it plays and what does it play with and maybe how loud it plays. They're not necessarily like re-EQing your drums live in the game. I mean, there are plugins and stuff like that, and there is some of that stuff. But not directly. But the game can go between a mono and a stereo and a surround mix in real time as you change it. So basically, there's still a lot of things to learn. So there's the linear side, and what we're going to be focusing on is what's the same from linear production to non-linear. Music for games is a non-linear format, meaning that the way the game is played will determine the final outcome. The music soundtrack doesn't exist in its final form until somebody plays the game. And then it is going to be maybe infinitely variable, or probably in reality only a certain number of random choices overall. But that's some of the stuff that we'll get into. So there is some brain breaking that happens in music for video games, because you are writing a piece of music for something where you have no clue what the final outcome is going to be, right? When you mix music and sound effects for a movie, every single time that explosion happens, it happens exactly the same way. Or when the fight starts, it happens the same way. And how do you account for that sort of thing in a video game platform? All right, let's get into some of the assignments here. We're going to take a quick pause. So let me throw this out. Anybody playing any video games? Anybody playing, what was the last game you played, or favorite game, or anything like that? Well, I take a pause here. Hold on. Let's see, Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, Grand Theft Auto, awesome. Like Super Nintendo stuff, Nintendo 64, DS games. Haven't played much modern games. Absolutely. The common answer to that is I used to play video games, but then I got into this degree program and I have no extra time for playing video games, which is you shouldn't be playing video games in instead of being successful in class. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I've been talking and not actually saying anything. So, what I said here was Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, Grand Theft Auto, awesome. Currently playing Grand Theft Auto. I like Super Nintendo stuff and Nintendo 64 and DS games. I haven't played many modern games. And what I was saying is that is more of the common answer. The common answer to that question is I don't play any games anymore. I used to play video games, love video games. But then either life changes or reality hits or more likely this degree program hits. And it's like, I used to have lots of times and opportunity to play video games, and that is very much the case. I am certainly in the same boat. I have a job and a family and kids and all that stuff. And so the amount of time to play video games is certainly gets smaller and smaller. But it's certainly very important to be up on the industry. So I got my PS4 over the holiday break. So I am equipped with all sorts of new games and gives me the opportunity to do video and share stuff with the class. And I'm really excited about what I can do with all of that. So, but it is, like I said, if certainly understandable through this entire degree program. But if you're interested in getting in the game industry, certainly nothing wrong with being up and playing all the newest and latest games. But they're so big and they take forever, and even that I'd play through not really the whole game. Like Grand Theft Auto, I would never leave my my studio and room because I'd be playing that forever and ever because it never feels like it ends. Anyway, okay, let's talk about assignments. We'll start with the overall kind of flow of the month for the assignments, and then we'll talk about new week 1 assignments. So first off, with assignments, don't fail, right? That's very easily said, and there's certainly challenges all the way through, but being successful and doing well on the assignments is certainly very, very capable overall. And so what we're really getting at is the way to be successful in the class. And number 1 would be download the assignments as soon as you can. Check them all out. And I say that on Monday afternoon, so that's a little unfair for me to say right now because people might not have had the opportunity to do that. But getting access to the assignments, don't wait until like the weekend just to download them and go, oh, I have no idea what this all means. But take the opportunity, any sort of issues, either issues with the assignment or issues with the technology or anything like that, we can get around any sort of stuff. But you just have to contact me and we can work through any sort of issues. Like there is some technology. There's games and software that you have to run on your computer, and I have a very, very good success ratio in getting all of that working. But try out the games, try out the software, make sure everything is working for you each week as the new assignments come online, and that way, any sort of issues arise, you can ask questions, and we can work through any sort of things as needed. Next part would be revisions. I already mentioned earlier that you have the opportunity to do revisions. All assignments will roll in on Sunday. I will grade them by Wednesday. They will be returned back to you so that Thursday and Friday, a revision assignment opens and closes. And you can make any and all changes to all of the assignments, not just the composition, but and that's the way that people do the best overall in the class. Meaning can't really, this is probably the first time you've written game music, so I can't necessarily think that you're going to knock it out of the park the first time, every single time, across everybody in the entire class. So I'm not going to say, haha, that thing you've never thought of before, wrong, fail. And there's no reason. less interested in the grades as opposed to your success in doing the projects. The games, especially the game compositions, where they are all well and good as assignments in this month, but nobody's ever going to ask you, like, hey, what was that grade that you got on this one assignment? They're going to want to listen to the assignment. They're going to want to listen to the game. And so all of the games are intended to be added to a demo reel or portfolio. So it's all about certainly doing well in the class, but creating the best sort of game and music that you can. And honestly, that's the way the game industry works. Nobody writes the full game and sends it off to the client. And they're like, that's perfect. I don't want you to change anything. There's a constant revision process and going back and forth to get to the ultimate result. So check out everything as soon as possible and definitely take part in the revisions each week. This is kind of a grade breakdown of how the assignments break down each week. Game composition is going to be your more detailed assignment or larger, bigger scope overall, where each week we give you a new game, and that game requires you to create a series of WAV files or music files for how it's set up in the game. And your other assignments, technical assignment, production technique, are often based off of your game composition in some way. So you will be delivering a series of WAV files. Music for a video game does not exist in one file. If you play, games last forever. Like I said, Grand Theft Auto, people put tens of hours, hundreds of hours, more like hundreds of hours into playing these games. Doesn't mean that there's a 100-hour long piece of music sitting on the disc somewhere. It's a whole bunch of little pieces and parts and chunks. Although I say that in Grand Theft Auto, and then all the radio stations are kind of one big long file, but that's more unique. Anyway. And so the same with your music. It won't exist in just one linear file. It's a series of individual files and chunks that are played back together to get the end result. Your technical assignment is taking something from your game composition and doing something technical with it. Like this week, it's delivery formats. It's making sure that you deliver files in multiple formats correctly, because often when you're working on a game, they want the high resolution 2496 or 44116, sample rate and bit depth. And then they also are releasing it on a mobile game, mobile device, releasing it on the web. I used to say they released it in a Flash game, but I don't think Flash really exists much anymore. So doing something technical with it. Production technique is a technique or workflow that helps in the production of music for games. Like this week, it's all about looping music files, which is extremely important in games. Week 2, it's all about actually 2 and 3 is doing all of the sound design for the previous games. So like week 1, you'll do composition for game 1. Week 2, you'll do composition for game 2 and sound design for week 1. And so by the end of the month, you'll have 3 games that all of the music and sound effects, all of the audio is your custom work. That is in a playable game that you can then distribute, put on your website, make it a video, put up the whole game, although video is often a better idea because it's a Mac game, so that kind of limits your audience. So we'll talk about all of that stuff. But like I said, the games are meant to be vehicles to demo your music. So like I said, by the end of the month, you'll have 3 games with all music and sound effects, because each of the games use music and sound effects in different ways. Quiz. There is a 20-question quiz, more so based off of the Wednesday classes and slides, because Wednesday is more of the information about the industry as a whole and what we're doing, not necessarily like assignments in the class. So you might certainly want to reference the slides for that. Oh, and of course, the archives. I'm doing all this, recording all the archives. Archives will be released the next day. I don't know. I'll see if I can get them up the night of, and I'll try to do that. But it takes some time to render and upload and all that stuff. And uploading from my house versus uploading from Full Sail. Full Sail has a wonderful big internet connection. And so it might be best to be done there. So we'll figure all that out. Yeah. So the slides, the archives, all of those will be good preparation for the quizzes. So let's talk about the games. Each one of the games, we will be talking more about 2D platformer here in just a little bit as we go back and talk about it more in detail. But our first game this week is a 2D platformer, which is a 2D platform game, which is they were very clever in naming it 2D platformer. A platform game it often has platforms that you run and you jump from one to the next. There's often punching or shooting or something where you got enemies attacking and you got to defend yourself against those. And so all of our games this month, actually, let me do this. Am I going to hear this? I don't want to hear it. Oh, yes I do.
Bring it on. Keep it classy. I say it'll be.
Oh no. What's this? Oh wait. Okay.
Keep it classy.
If I totally blasted.
Bring it on. Bombs away.
So
Keep it classy. I say it'll be. Bring it on.
I can do that. Okay. So 2D platform in this game, it is a great game to start out with because it's not a very big game. Actually, all of our games are really slivers of a much larger game. And so there are individual levels or a portion of the game, but they demonstrate the setup of the music and its.
I say it'll be. Bring it on.
And so, 2D platformer here is an absolutely ridiculous concept. 2D platformer is made by Unity Games in the Unity software. So, if you play, especially if you play a lot of mobile games,
bring it on. I say it'll be.
What's going on here?
Bring it on. Keep it classy. Ow, 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 ow. I say it'll be.
Go away. Sorry about that. Let me do this one. I'll do this one where I can do this. Turn it down. It's a whole lot easier in QuickTime. Okay. Sorry about that. So let me do this again. And saying that 2D platformer is made by Unity Games in the Unity game engine. So if you play a lot of mobile games, let's see if this plays. Okay, good. So if you play a lot of mobile games, then you might see that logo every once in a while. It's a very popular game engine or system to create games, more so for mobile devices, although that is certainly changing. And we will talk about what that means, what a game engine is, what the Unity game engine is. All of our games this month are powered with the Unity game engine. And one of the great things that we'll talk about throughout the month is that all of the tools that we will be talking about are freely available for you to download and work with and create your own projects. So I highly encourage you to download the technology and the software that we will be discussing. So I think what I was saying was that 2D platformer is an absolutely ridiculous game, right? It looks like the aliens are invading. They're invading London. I think this is the London Bridge that has fallen down because a huge alien ship has taken over. You can also see in the background, where is it? There's the London Eye and the Big Ben all blowed up. So the aliens are attacking, and for some reason, you are a bean with a monocle and a top hat and a bazooka, and you're the only hope to save London from this invasion. And so an absolutely ridiculous concept allows us to do all sorts of fun things with the music and how it works together. So the game itself is based off of the idea, the music for the game is based off of the idea of intros, main loops, and endings. So let me bring up this here, and I will talk about this certainly more in depth, but show you here. Oh, come on. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh. 1, 2, 3. 3, 3, 3. I could just zoom in and make it a lot easier on myself. Okay, what I'm showing you here is that the files are separated out into one of 3 categories. And those 3 categories are intros. Come on, Logic, pay attention. Intros, main loops, and endings. Why are you not letting me? Why are you losing my selection? Highlight and drag. There we go. Is it my mouse? So there are 3 categories, and just to make this a little bit easier, because this is multiple projects. Hide. This is one. Now, this is not the production session. This is the final bounces. These are the final files that you will turn in. And we have 3 intros. These are 2-bar loops, or 2-bar, what are known as one-shots, because they only play once. 2-bar intros. 3 8-bar main loops. And these main loops will be heard for most of the gameplay. And the game will be randomly switching between these in any sort of order that it chooses. And we'll talk about what that means. And then 3 endings. So the intros are heard as soon as the player drops in and plays all the way through the intro file. So I don't know, that's about 2 bars, let's say. Then, I guess the other thing to point out is, this trips people up every once in a while. You use the video to check out the game and what's it all about, and you play the game. That's even better than just watching the video. But don't score the video. Don't compose directly to the timing of the video, because the next person who plays isn't going to play that way. And so you can use it as reference and to check it all out, but you shouldn't say, okay, the player is always going to land exactly at 4 seconds. It's not going to be that way. They could stand over here just waiting for the onslaught to happen, or whatever happens. So use the video as reference. So once the intro 2 bars have passed, then it's going to randomly choose one of these 3 main loops. It might, and I guess it should also say that it's going to randomly choose one of these 3 intros. So the game knows that there are 3 files that are named Music Intro 1, Music Intro 02, Music Intro 03. It's only looking for files exactly named that. The game, while it's a computer and it's software and it does some amazing stuff, it's relatively dumb in its understanding of your intentions, right? You have to tell it explicitly exactly what you want it to do. So it's expecting 3 2-bar intros named exactly that. Then once you pass, so let's say it just, let's say it chooses one of these. So let me just drag it over here, show you what. Oop. Right here. Oh, what's up with my mouse and dragging? And then it's going to randomly choose a main loop. After it's passed from the 2 bars of the intro, it's going to randomly choose a main loop. Now, this means that all 3 of your intros have to work with all 3 of your main loops. Instrumentation, melodically, harmonically, rhythmically, tempo, key, all that stuff is going to be a whole lot smoother if it's all at the same specifications. And so the game will then randomly jump around these main loops. Maybe it'll play 2, and then it'll play 1, and then it'll play 3, and then it'll go back to 3, and then it'll choose 1, and then it'll choose 3, and then it'll choose 2, or whatever the the random setup is going to be. And the game knows, or you compose it as such, that these are not three different songs. These are three parts of the overall same song. Even though this is ends up being 9 files. You have 3 intros, 3 main loops, and 3 endings. It's not 9 different songs. It is 3 variations on the same composition. So that means similar instrumentation, similar pacing, and instrumentation, overall musical direction. Let me just jump over to the other games real quick. So this gives you an idea of how your first game here is going to operate. Next week, so with 2D platformer, I leave it open to you in the instrumentation and the style of music, the musical approach. It is a lighthearted, silly, probably intended for all ages, family-friendly kind of game. So it probably doesn't need to be too dark or gritty or maybe scary or whatever it is. So there's certain things you might want to avoid, but whatever inspires you for that particular composition, we leave it a little bit more open the first round. Angry Bots, which is week 2. This is a futuristic third-person shooter. And so shooter games are very, very common in the industry. You're given all sorts of weapons and all sorts of, either it's zombies or it's robots, or it's, I don't know, there's a fantasy world or whatever it is. With this type of game, the overall function of the music is based off of the idea of ambient and action, meaning there are parts of the game where you're just kind of sitting there and exploring and wandering around and there's no enemies around. And then there's other times, a lot of the time, when you're actually battling with the enemy. And so there are periods of time that are ambient, and I'm not talking about the style or genre of ambient music. I'm talking about less intensity, less energy from the music, not just slow and drony. Is that a word? Just a drone or just a pad or just sitting there in one place for hours on end while you meditate on the problems of the world. Ambient means I'm just safe right now. Another way of thinking about it is exploration and battle. Right? It's very, very common in games. A lot of times you're just wandering around totally lost and trying to figure out what's going on. And there's one style of music for that. And then other times you're engaged in battle and it has to ramp up the overall tension and energy. So that will be next week. The overall aesthetic for this game is much more dark and gritty and futuristic and higher energy level overall. So with this one, this is the time to whip out all the synths and samplers and effects processors and drum machines and maybe go for more of a modern production style. Electronic music works very well. Heavy rock works well. Guitars or metal or whatever genre you want to classify it in. And so that kind of is more of a direction because it fits the overall theme of the game. And then our week 3, our game is called Palace of Erenthalion, which is an open world fantasy game. And this kind of mimics more of the fantasy type experience of maybe, I don't want to say started, but Legend of Zelda is a very popular version. World of Warcraft is very popular. There's Elder Scrolls these days, and Dragon's Age, and The Witcher, and all sorts of cool games. And when you get into open world fantasy games, that might even throw in Grand Theft Auto and all that. Even though it's not dragons and wizards, it's still open world, meaning that your player is dropped into the middle of the world, and you kind of feel like you can go in any sort of direction and do whatever you want. It's much less of a linear game experience. With Angry Bots, you start at point A and you fight your way to point B, and then you fight your way to point C, and you keep progressing through it's almost like a rat in a maze. You're a very linear progression, right? The single player story version of Call of Duty is like this. Battlefield is like this, where it's you start at level 1 and you affect your way through level 1, then you get to level 2 and you keep going. An open world fantasy game is the whole world just exists constantly, and you can go off in any sort of direction. You can do all sorts of nothing that actually has anything to do with the actual storyline, but it's so big and massive, there's all sorts of fun stuff, right? People play Grand Theft Auto not necessarily to go and finish the storyline, but to go and cause all sorts of havoc and have some fun in the game world. But this being a fantasy game, musically, we are throwing away all the synths, all the samplers, all the more of the electronic styles, and going to strictly orchestral acoustic instruments. Now, granted, it's still inside your computer. It's a sample library, but acoustic instrumentation. So those are the general directions of the different games that we will be working on. Let me go back and talk more about 2D platformer for this week. So let's load up a couple of things here. I'll talk about 2D platformer, and then I'll talk about the technical assignments for this week and the production technique. So I need a music document. When you download the game composition assignment, these are some of the documents you get. Grade sheet. Come on, mouse. I'm not happy with my mouse. What? Grade sheet. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to bring it back up. What else? Okay. That's about it. So you get the movie. You get the game. Definitely check out the game more so than the movie. The movie is just there for quick reference when you don't want to load up the game every single time. And so there's a lot of information and overview restated here, and I'll be hitting a lot of this stuff. I guess I didn't really say this with 2D platformer games. Very common, a little bit more so in the early phases of the game industry, but classics like Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Mega Man, those were classic platformer games. Now the modern versions would be like Limbo and Braid and Jetpack Joyride, if you've ever played any of those. So yeah, your character is meant to run and jump and shoot, basically. Indication of musical style, but really we are saying it's left open to you, but it can be wacky and silly in its sort of approach. Monty Python meets Mars Attacks, Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers, those kind of things where it can be ridiculous and then maybe have a little of alien invasion kind of feel to it. How to play it, pretty straightforward, although not necessarily. But again, if you aren't into actually playing the games, definitely load it up and check it all out and figure out how to hopefully navigate just a little bit through it. But like, you don't have to be the highest score or anything to understand what's going on. This is really what I want to get to. The asset list. The asset list is very important in game production. Honestly, it's often how you get paid, meaning that everybody agrees that you are going to deliver this many WAV files. They're going to be all about this and in this format, and they're going to contain this music named this specific way, and then you deliver those, and they approve them, and then you get paid. So a asset list is a very clear document. And I say that because there's all sorts of reasons that gets broken. But a lot of times it is beneficial to you to state exactly what you're going to deliver and how it's going to be delivered. And so, like I said, 3 music intros. Those are each 2 bars. Everything's going to be delivered in 16-bit 44:1 stereo files. Excuse me. The intros do not loop. The endings do not loop. But these main loops, they loop. And when I say loop, is that the audio, when it is 8 bars, the audio is set up so that the only thing is those 8 bars. And when you reach the end of the 8 bars, it's going to return back to the top, right? Musically, it has to reach the end and return back to the top in a seamless sort of way without any sort of interruptions to the music or silence or gaps. I am going to play these examples here. I'm not just going to click on them all day long. And we'll actually listen to them, but once we've pointed out everything. Looping files doesn't mean this. Where is it? Doesn't mean this, right? If you were to loop a beat in a piece of music, then this is what you do, right? Or you do some version of something like this. But this, if you bounced it out this way, first off, you're not sure in a game how long it needs to play. Is 4 times looping enough? How long? You're going to have people that just blast through the game and are going to hear it maybe once, and you're going to have other people that are slow as anything through the game, and they're going to get so annoyed because it goes around and around and around. You don't want it to play 4 times and stop. You want it to go infinitely. And this is wasting file size if you bounce it out, where you're basically doubling or more the file size overall. So a loop is a continuous piece of music that when it reaches the end, it returns back to the top with no gaps or there should be nothing to the player that says, oh, that's a loop. I just heard that. And like the stitching from the end back to the front should not be obvious. And the game is going to do this. You don't need to loop the file. The file is 8 bars and it like if you listen to it, the music loops, but you don't need to bounce out some like different looped version of it. The game is going to do this, and the game has control of how long it's going to play. This asset list is a very handy tool to understand exactly what you are doing and creating. You are going to, the end result here is going to be a series of 9 audio files, like we said, 3 intros, 3 main loops, 3 endings, named exactly like this. Tested in the game, because from day one you have the ability to throw all of your music in the game and test it out, and a screenshot of your DAW session. You don't have to send me the sessions. I don't care what DAW you create your music in. I treat this class like I am the client and you are the game composer, and I hire you to create the music for my game project, and I have no idea what you mean when you say DAW, or clients do. Don't. I understand what you mean when you say DAW, but basically they're not necessarily going to have the language or understand all of the technical ins and outs. It's like, I don't care which brand of hammer you use to build my house, just build my house. So whatever DAW it is, it's up to you. So this is going to be the final results of the files, WAV files and a screenshot. So let's listen to... Let's go back to Logic here and actually listen to some demos here. We'll bring all these back. I don't care about hiding them anymore, at least right now. What else? I want them all to be muted except for the first one. Mute. Unmute, mute. All right. I'll do this again. Make sure I got all my routing happening. Hello? Check. Oh. Let's do this. There we go. Let's see. Bring this down so we don't kill anybody. And I'll just start over here to make sure, make sure this is working. Looks like it's working for you. Can you hear that and still hear me? I'll be turning it up and down. Yes, excellent. Very good. All right, so I'm actually going to, I'll start with the main loops because that's what you hear most of the time in the game, and it gives us a lot better reference for where the intros and outros are. All right, so the things that you were listening for is that each one of these loops is the full stereo mix, meaning that each one of these has to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. It probably needs to be more than just 4 instrument lines, where multiple instruments make up the harmonies. You probably focus on one strong melody. Having melody and rhythm, absolutely important all the way through. It can't just be a series of chords and with nothing else on it. The main thing that separates these, so if it's the same drum kit, same bass, instrument, same harmony instruments, same melodic instruments. How do you make them different? How do you make them not sound exactly the same? And it's not in your instrumentation, it is the composition. Different chord progressions, or I wouldn't say completely different, but slight changes to the chord progression, to the rhythm, with big changes to the melody. Each cue should have its own strong melodic lead. So strong melodic instruments and supporting harmony, bass, and drums. You don't have to change everything every single time, but maybe changing up the hi-hat from one drum part to the next. And certainly the lead instrument, either the instrument can change, certainly the composition or the melody can change. And the other thing is that they loop. When it reaches the end, it returns back to the front with no sort of issue. So let's start here. So the drums, we have a bass, and we have a couple of a couple of more brass layers, and then the marimba kind of on top, playing the lead melody. Now, I like the instrumentation here. There really isn't much of a strong melody. Notice that as it goes from one to the next, it actually is quite repetitive. If I did, I don't know if this is going to do properly. Oh yeah, okay. Look, it's got 120. All right, so this is basically the same as this. You want to have more development than just repeating the same ideas over and over. Even if you switch it here to another key, there's not much of a strong melody, at least in this one. These are a little bit better. Notice changes in the drum pattern, changes in the progression, changes in the bass line. When it reaches the end, jumps right back to the front and is invisible that it even looped, except for you can visually see it. This is a little bit more of a development through the melody. So one big idea that I harp on is that is repetition within your 8-bar loop, or your 16-bar loop, or 2-bar loop, or whatever it is. The game might sit here and loop this over and over and over again. You don't want it to be repetitive within the 8 bars. Like, don't give me 8 bars that develop through the entire 8 bars, especially with the melody. Don't give me a 4-bar phrase that's played twice, which is like this. Right? The first half of this and the second half are basically the same. They do a key change, but add more development. Don't make it so repetitive within the 8 bars that you annoy the player as that 8 bars goes around and around. So strong melody, strong instrumentation. The purpose of your intro cues is to create a sort of build or rise into the main loop cues. Again, these are all going to play just once right before the main loops start, but they need to feel like a continuous part of the music. So any one of these is going to pair with any of the other ones, but let's just see what happens here. The intro should rise melodically. It should end within 2 bars because it has to move very quickly immediately into the main loop. And it has to use all of the instrumentation from the main loop. All right, so works quite well that it kind of holds there, hits that last chord, allows it to easily drop into the next one. The only thing here is notice that crash at the end. Crash gets cut off. Right here. Right? So as these files transition from one to the next, you want to make sure that anything that would overlap or overlap into the next thing does not get cut off. So watch out for cymbals, things with really long decay overall. Let's try another one here. a solid rise, build, and using not just a drum roll or drum fill, using all the instrumentation, melody, harmony, everything should create that sense of build-up. And then the 3 outro cues, their intention is to resolve the main loop cue, to come to a finish or a finale, right? Have a real obvious, and I should probably even take off the loop because it's not going to loop. All right, so drums typically have one last roll or fill to a final crash maybe. Melody resolves to a final note, chords resolve to a final chord. Everything hits on that last point and ends the piece. You can't just, what you don't want it to do, some people do this. They're like, oh, cool, I'm just going to take my main loop, and I'm just make it 2 bars. Dude, done. I have my ending. Well, it just kind of stops. It's great. And I just get chopped off there. So, yeah, things to pay attention to. Let's listen to something else down here. This one's a little bit more electronic. All right, notice that phrase, the first round. There's a little slight change, but even that, bar 1 and 2 states the phrase, or bar 4, and then bar 5 and 6 state it again, but they hit one different note. So again, watch out for the looping. Don't be repetitive. Watch out for arpeggiators. They increase repetition overall. He does change it up in the second half, so that helps a bit. Change to the percussion, kind of just halftime there. All right. And let's see. Let's try one more. I'm always a little wary of things that are all flattened out like this. A lot of times there's a compressor or limiter on the main output that just kind of flattens everything. Always good because it's not really going through a mastering stage to maybe have a compressor and limiter to control things, but watch out for kind of brick wall limiting here. Although it takes some listening to actually like see if, I mean, visually it's like, but who knows, maybe listening to it, it works for the particular style. And this is much better than really, really low volume, right? Let's see, can I do this? It's not going to show me. Really, really low volume is going to cause problems because you won't be able to hear it in the game. It will be overshadowed by all of the other ones. It'll be overpowered. Okay, let's do main loop first. Pulse got a little bit of the 8-bit drums to it. There's a progression. I would watch out for things like adding the snare in the second half, because even though the melody moves forward, you can very easily identify where the loop is because the snare drops out. And then, oh, it must be in the first half. And then the snare drops in, and I should be in the second half of the piece of music. Change to the drums. Change to the chord progression, but it should really be a stronger melody overall. Melody shouldn't just directly follow the game, the chord progression. There's a little change at the end there. This one's a little better. All right, so again, the style and the approach musically is much more up to you. These are good examples. They don't really feel like they rise up as intros. They feel more like 2-bar loops. Like I could sit here and do this, and it would make sense. There's a little hiccup there, but that's more because it's 2 bars long. But you always want a sense of a rise. You want it to rise up to a newer pitch or chord or intensity or just that upward movement. And if it did that and you looped it, it would rise, 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 and fall back down. Rise, 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 and fall back down. But here, it's much more consistent all the way through. It's a little bit of drums in there and a reverse something, but you want all instrument layers to help that out. The other thing, and this is a good example, is your endings need to resolve to silence. And it looks like these I almost get there. They kind of maybe get cut off at the end. Like these get cut off, like the cymbals got cut off earlier. Let's try that again. And again. All right, so there's enough time for everything to end up and get out of the way, but you can still, it even gets cut off. So you want to make sure everything reaches all the way to silence. Let's see here. I think these might be. And get out of the way in enough time. All right, so that should give you some overview of the 2D platformer game composition. If you have any questions about how it's set up or different approaches, certainly let me know. But definitely check over the grade sheet that you have access to. Really, the large categories here are the formatting of the files. Is everything 16-bit, 44.1, stereo, properly named, all that sort of stuff. Instrumentation is your choice of instrumentation. Is there enough instrument layers, and is it, well, I guess consistency. So you have basically drums, bass, harmony, and melody, and a couple instruments that represent those. Consistency is how consistent is the music and instrumentation going from the intro to the main loop, and then from the main loop into the ending. Composition. This is the build or the rise for into the main loops. So you need to have that sort of intro kind of vibe to it. And mix. Just a general overall, is it too loud? Is it distorting? Is it too low? Can't be heard in the game? Any really, really crazy effects or panning or stuff that just doesn't work. Watch out for things heavily panned, either left or right, because you're not sure that the person is going to be listening in stereo, and they might be listening in their earbuds with one earbud in, and like I do during these things where I have one ear off and so I can hear what I'm talking about, and they might be playing out their mono TV or something like that. So watch out for really hard panned items. And the only other one here in the main loop is the looping. How smooth or seamless is the loop? So make sure you double check all of these, that you've hit all these points, and it'll give you a good place to head. Here, Alex, missed the first 45 minutes. When will the archive be up? Yeah, I'm going to try to get them up tonight, meaning it'll take a little while to convert them, and then I've got to upload them to Google Drive. And so I'm not going to guarantee tonight. It'll probably be tomorrow. But I'm going to go through the process and see. Let's see, because yeah, previously I was just doing them the next day, and now I have enough time, and maybe I can set something up for the archive, but we'll see. Definitely tomorrow, the day after these things are available. Quickly, let me get to your production, your technical assignment, and your production technique. I do want to point out, according to my clock, it is 4:58 Eastern Time, Eastern Standard Time, and I do post that the class is goes from 3:30 to 5, and I attempt to make that happen as much as possible. But especially like days like today and other like the days when we're doing the peer review, I'm not just going to cut it off. So we will. If I need to go past 5, I certainly will. I understand if you can't make it beyond then and you need to catch the archive at another point, that's perfectly fine. But just to let you know that I might go beyond 5 every once in a while. I try to keep it by 5:30, like within the next half hour, like the next 15 minutes, and sometimes I just keep talking and it goes a little bit longer than that. But it's really more important when we're doing the peer review, and you're like the 7th one in the list, and I haven't gotten to you yet, so I will definitely hit on all aspects. So let me, where did I threw all this stuff up here, but your technical assignment. Your technical assignment is taking the files and the assets that you've created in the game composition and bouncing them out into multiple formats. For the main delivery of the game composition, you will be delivering 16-bit 44.1 stereo wave files, which is very common in everything. But like I said, a lot of games need those files in multiple formats. And they don't want to run the risk of messing something up, so they often ask the composer to do this. And so delivery of the files is absolutely important because the game is only programmed to find files named exactly like this. And our games are set up to only work with 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. In this assignment, you're going to be making 16-bit 22K stereo files and 8-bit 22K mono files. So pay attention to the formats. Pay attention to bouncing everything out. If I were to bounce out this file, I hit Apple Bounce, and I go PCM, Wave, 16-bit, 22K, and you go to find stereo, and you can't find stereo. It's either interleaved or split. Those are 2 stereo formats. And you want an interleaved file. Interleaved file means it's one file with 2 channels in it. It's what we're most commonly used. And if a client has no clue what you're talking about, do you want a split file or an interleaved file? And if they look at you weird, like they have no clue what you're talking about, then they want an interleaved file. That's what most people think of. Excuse me. And so bouncing out a stereo file at 22K is not all that different overall. Nothing brand new to that. You bounce out files all the time. So it's more about paying attention to the details and getting everything set up properly. Naming everything, formatting everything. The difference comes in when you want a mono version of the file. If you want a 8-bit 22K mono core audio file, there's a couple of things you need to do. First is, well, you'd set your time in and out. One thing that is very, very handy throughout this entire month, since you're doing loops, using loops so much, right-click on your marquee and choose Auto Set Locators. And it's going to automatically put your marquee at the beginning and end of your region boundaries, right? As I click around, it moves it around, and I turn cycle on and off, and I have awesome loops. I don't have to do this thing where I'm like, okay, is it perfect? And I zoom way in and make it perfect. I don't want to have to think that much. So auto set locators, right? If I have this off and I click around, it's not going to move my locator. So setting up loops are going to be a whole lot easier with auto set locators. So now I want to bounce out a mono file. So I hit Apple Bounce and I go to Core Audio Files. Core Audio Files are the standard file format for Apple iOS devices. For smart iPhones and tablets and iPads and all that stuff, much more common to find core audio files. And then we want 8-bit, we want 22K, right? Is that what I want? Hello. That's a great sheet. That's the easiest thing to reference. Hello. Or not. There it is. 8-bit 22K mono files. So I go in here and I do 8-bit 22K and I want a mono file. And you can't get one. You get interleaved and split. Like we said, interleaved is one stereo file. And you can kind of cheat a little bit and do a split file, but that's not really a mono file. Split file is two mono files. One that is typically .l for everything that is left, and one is .r for everything that is right. And you could just delete the right-hand version, right side, and then you'd kind of have a mono file, but it wouldn't be the full mix. It would just be the left side of an audio file. So split is not what you want to do either. It's not going to give you a mono file. So how do I get mono? First step here. Let me point this out before I get into that. There is, and I'm just clicking all over the place. There is a technical assignment workflow that goes through all of the steps and tells you step by step how to bounce everything, right? There's a 16-bit 22K stereo files talking about auto set locators. Then there's hello, where are you? Bouncing 8-bit 22K mono, which is excuse me, similar, but this is where Logic and I disagree a little bit. So I want to bounce this. I want to bounce it as mono. So I can set this as mono. I set my output here, my mono output, or my output channel to be mono. I switch this button that goes between stereo and mono. It will sum my stereo music down to mono. So that's good. And then I went ahead and Apple bounce, and I come back in here, and I'm like, where's my mono? I still don't have mono. And this is the part that bugs me. Hitting Apple B or Apple bounce over and over, like that's what I'm used to. I go to file bounce and I bounce everything out. Well, if you want a mono file, it's a little bit different because you have to set your channel to mono and then you hit this B and CE button. Hitting this B and CE bounces this mono channel specifically and everything running through it. Core audio file, 8-bit, 22K, and then there's no choice for stereo. It's just mono. And then I don't even agree. It doesn't even say mono. It just grayed out. But whatever. They didn't ask me. So there you go. Don't include audio tail because that will mess up your loop. You don't typically want to normalize anything. You want to perfect your mix. So those are the things to pay attention to. That's the biggest thing. Most people don't really have trouble with the assignment. It's just certain aspects of getting Logic to bounce correctly. Your production technique is somewhere. There it is. Production technique. There is a workflow PDF for this that goes through step by step. Excuse me. And this is all about looping files. And I didn't load up that Logic session. Let's see. Online week 1 production technique demo session load. This requires contact. You need to have contact installed with the factory library available to be able to complete this assignment and have the best set of palette of instruments for the rest of your compositions. If that's trouble for any reason, please let me know. We'll figure something out. But when you pop up in this, there is a guide here that basically sums up what's in the PDF. And there are 3 parts here. There is part 1 where you are topping and tailing and editing a file, which is basic looping, right? This is just finding the beginning of the loop, finding the end of the loop. This is what most looping is. And looping is a very common technique for a couple reasons. A lot of music for games is composed without information of where it's finally going to be placed. Like, I'm going to write some action music, and I'm going to write some enemy music, and I'm going to write music that I think will work in level 1, but it ends up in level 10, right? So you often in the beginning are just writing music for the sake of music and having material. then later on you are making it fit into the game. And so this is a really good role for a junior music composer or junior sound designer or a junior audio team member for a game, where you are taking professionally created music and editing it down to work in the game. So first thing I'm going to do is make a copy of this so I don't mess up the original. I can always go back to that. And what you are going to do here is find the beginning, the downbeat basically, find the beginning of a 4 or 8 bar loop, and find the end of it also. So let me just do this real quick. Hopefully this is just basic editing and is nothing mind-blowing in this process. Right, so I'm going to find a downbeat here. And I think I just heard one with that cymbal crash. So there's one. So I found the downbeat. And zoom in here, and I don't do that. I find the downbeat again. Silly loop. Oh, I keep hitting C. That's what I'm doing. Let's try that again. Downbeat. Right here. There it is. Zoom way in. Listen to that. There's my cymbal crash. There's my downbeat. All right. Then I'm going to zoom way, way, way in and just find a solid edit points where a zero crossing, where it doesn't, it's not above or below the line, and everything has reached 0. And that's going to be your best place to split. Right before that attack, and I just hit S to split, or at least on my end, it's S. And then I listen for the end. This is topping and tailing, finding the top and finding the tail. And this ones are really easy because it's really a cymbal crash that you're looking for. Boom, there it is. So I find this. And I make another split. And then I should have my loop. Right? If I listen to this, make it loop. Right? If you've ever edited loops before, this is probably the approach you did. Take the first part, find the end, make a loop. All right. Then you're going to do that for the 3 different intensities, low, medium, and high. You're also going to find your own audio file, your music file, and edit more. All right. So that is basic topping and tailing. Part 2, the other thing I should point out is you double click on a folder to go in, and you hit this up arrow to go out, right? Here's part 1. Let me do this. Can I get rid of, I don't want that. There we go. A little more room. Yeah, you double click on part 1, goes in, hit the up arrow, goes back out, go over here to part 2, and double click to go in. All right, this is bouncing MIDI loops. And this is like, I've bounced MIDI before. This should be no problem, but there's some issues here. And other than it being extremely loud, and now I know why I need my inspector here, so I can turn it down. Let's try that again. So, drums, melody. Now, listen to the cymbal crash at the end. There's a cymbal crash that blends back into the first part every single time. There's also reverb and delay every single time I stop. So there's all that goodness happening in the background. If I just cut off this audio file, well, it wasn't cut off in here because it's all MIDI. So it all bounces around. So you think, wow, that's the best 4-bar loop I've ever made. I'm ready to bounce it out. And so you hit Apple Bounce, and you set it back up to a wave and 16-bit 44.1. We'll do an interleaved file. I'm going to add this back to the project so I can play with it. And it's at the start and the end time that I want. That's good, so I bounce it out. And I'm going to call this electronic. I think that's what it's named. And so I use that. And I go into my bin over here, and I need a new track. You should always double check your files. Don't just believe that what you bounced is correct. And you always have to come back in. In fact, I just noticed that it's not loud enough because my file is too far down. If I drag this out, put this on a track, it's way, way too low. Go away. Go away. Ah, that's no good. So let me try that again. Let me bring this back up. It bounces it offline anyway. So Apple bounce. Yeah. Good. Electronic, you gonna let me replace it? Yes. No. 2, fine. Let's try that. So I bring that. Whoa, that looks a whole lot better. Let's bring this down. Let's bring this in. And mute all this. And we listened to just this. Right? If I pause it, or I stop it, there's no reverb. There's none of that fun stuff. Listen to the loop. Listen to that crash cymbal. The crash cymbal gets cut off each time. So that's no good. All the fun stuff in here is all cut off by my loop. So this is all about how do you loop stuff that causes issue with things getting cut off at the end. And so the way you're going to progress through this is you're going to take all of the MIDI information, and this is a really handy technique for all of your music throughout the month. This gives you seamless loops. And what you're going to do is you highlight everything, and no, we don't duplicate it that way. You hold Option, and you drag it over, and you line it up right next to it, and you basically bounce it out twice as long. So you've doubled up everything. So let me bring this back in. Bring back this and hit Apple Bounce, and everything's good. Hit OK. Yes, electronic 3. And now you're going to want your final version to be electronic, just electronic.wave. So don't add all these extra names. You might have to fix it outside. And so we have this twice as long, and that kind of works, but it's too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go halfway through it, exactly halfway, which is 197, and I'm going to split the file. I'm splitting the file and just delete the first half, and I'm only going to use the second half. And the reason for that is that symbol that gets cut off here in the beginning is going to, let me do it this way. Yeah, that symbol that's cut off over here, right? If I listen to this. Symbol. That cymbal crash that gets cut off, the second half is actually over here. So you hear this phantom cymbal in the beginning, but when it loops, you got invisible, and that doesn't work. Why doesn't that work? Let me select my loop here again. Logic, you're making me a liar. That's not a seamless loop. Let's try that again. Do that really fast. Take all the stuff, highlight, bounce it out twice as long, highlight both parts. Oh, I probably didn't slice it maybe exactly in the place I needed to. Bounce. Yes. Bring up the fader. Yes. Bounce. Yes. Electronic 4. Fine. And let's maybe pay a little more attention this time. And I go here, perfectly halfway through. Zoom way in, yes, it's all should be there. And a split. Now there it is. It's a little better. Is it my limiter? Plug-in processing might cause bad loops. Bounce. Yes. Go 5. Take 5. Do. Loop. Loop. There we go. Okay, there we go. Then you can still hear... Oh, nope. Liar. I was listening to the wrong thing. Don't make me a liar. Work. I don't know. I'm giving up. I'm going to have to look at my session again. If I did anything to it. I blame logic. Anyway, if you have troubles with that, you just contact me and we'll work through that. And I, separately, outside, will work on it. And then the third part, which I'm sure will be equally as successful, I'm going to go over here, and this one is... It's like I have to remove it entirely. This one is a weird pad, right? Both of these are just weird sounds. And this stuff works really well as a layer to the overall music, but is really hard to loop because there's so much change in the pitch and the timbre and all sorts of stuff. And I could spend a whole bunch of time and probably get it pretty close, and that is not spending a whole bunch of time, but what you can often get is something like this. See how well I did? Right? There's a real obvious level difference there. And you could do that and spend a lot of time and probably get it pretty close. But here's a quick way of making things loop. I'm just going to drag in a copy of this down there, mute that, and all I'm going to do is find a beginning point, find an end point. Now, when you're doing this for real, you would actually listen to it and pay attention. But notice that it really doesn't matter where I do any of this stuff. The technique is always going to work. So I slice out a smaller chunk out of the much larger one, right? This is the part that I want to make loop. Then I'm going to split the file in half. And I'm going to take the left side and drag it over the right side. Not all the way over here past it, but like overlap it a little bit. I'm going to do something like that. Where you chop it, where you edit it, where you overlap is entirely up to you. The technique will still work. Then all we have to do is go through here and crossfade the middle. Because the ends, let me just do this. The ends are going to work. The in points and out points. If I listen here and I listen over here, listen to the loop. Hiccup. So, what are you doing here? Are you like snapping to something? Grid? No, I want my grid. Are you like doing something logic smart for me? I don't want you to be smarter than me, logic. I think my problem is I go in here. Well, that looks correct. I'm looking at you funny, logic. Is it because it's a new year and you've decided it's 2016? I'm not going to loop. Okay, back here. Pointer tool. Split. Larger section out, right? Chop, chop, delete, delete. Go in here, find a point, split the file. Split the file. Go in here, move one side or the other, and this is I did recreate this session. Hold on. I'm not wondering if because I changed something that it's messing with everything. Let's go back in time and go here and here and here And all right. I'm guessing the session because there's no way that I could be wrong. That's just... I'm human. You're a computer. There's no way I can be wrong. Okay. Option. Drag. Mute. Split. S. Split. Split. Yes. Yes. Split in half. Take left side. Oops. Split in half. Take left side. Pass it over the right side. Switch to your fade tool and do a big crossfade in the middle to cover up that middle part. And then you cross your fingers and your toes. And you should not have to cross your fingers and toes, but... Okay. This requires more investigation because this is the session that I used last month. Is it like using it? Maybe I did something in my preferences. Anyway, let's see if you have the same issues that I'm having. The technique is correct. I'm blaming it on logic, and it's let's see. Is there any sort of gap in the beginning? There's the beginning. Is it? Oh, no, I was messing with something. Hold on. Hold, please. I was messing something in here with my cycle processing. Cycle algorithm. Ooh. Oh my goodness, I'm a genius. Okay, sorry about that. That was some setting in my settings. Okay. Phew, man, I thought I was all sorts of crazy. Okay, so now this was me messing around with a setting because cycling in Logic ticks me off. But I think that should be the default setting there. Let me go back here. I apologize. Fun troubleshooting live. No, I was working on another project, and I was having problems with cycle. This just blows my mind. There's so many, not so many. There's certain things in Logic that just doesn't make sense. It's not logical to me. Meaning, like if I do my marquee here, this is what I was messing with cycle. If I go here, and I might need to do a 4-bar. If I do in this last beat, my loop actually jumps to the front. And the loop's fine, but if my automation is like this, give me a fader. Go in here. No. No. Go into the folder. Go in here. On a track. Show me some automation here. Pencil tool. Show me some automation. No? No automation? Not going to do it for me. Oh, display volume. Okay. So if I do this like change here, but my loop's over here, cooperate Logic, come on, there you go. So if I go like here, and I'm during my loop, too long. Drag this out here. Okay, my automation should be... My automation should be at 0. And that's fine. Except for if my automation isn't at 0, like right before it, like this, like this, right? If I do something like this, watch my fader. Even inside the loop. Oh, it's not doing it. Track. Read. Huh. Logic, you liar. So, oh, maybe it's a region. Do I need a region? Anyway. Oh, it's an audio. Maybe it's a MIDI region. Let me go to a MIDI region. Maybe it was a MIDI region that I was doing. So I create a MIDI region and I add automation to it, and I add automation to it, and I put this in a loop, and I make my change like right before it. Nope, I'm a liar. Let's see, maybe it was this. Logic's New Year's resolution was to make me a liar. No, whatever. That was in another session. Who knows? Okay, so I am going to say that all of those fun technical issues were my computer and my session and me working on other things outside of class, inside of Logic. So, but are still settings that proliferate or persist across multiple sessions. Anyway, that's fun. Okay, sorry for the short lesson in fun things with Logic. Don't save. Okay, I think that is everything that I want to get to. Thank you for sticking everything out. I did that, I did that, I did that. Talked about the production technique, talked about the technical assignment. So let's wrap it up there. And yeah, if you run into some of these issues or don't run into these issues, let me know so that I know it's just me. And it's what I did over the holiday break. All right, I'll stick around for a few minutes to answer any questions if you would like to ask some questions there. And other than that, have a good evening, and I'll see you again on Monday. All right, thanks a lot.